Hey guys, let me take you somewhere far away. Not just in distance, but in time. Deep into the thickest rainforests of the Amazon basin, where the air hums with life, the ground swallows footsteps, and time itself seems to hang like fog between ancient trees. Somewhere beneath the leaves, under layers of earth, vines, and centuries of silence, forgotten cities still sleep. Yes, you heard me right, entire cities. Not villages, not outposts, but sprawling, organized settlements with road systems, ceremonial platforms, aqueducts, and walls carved from stone. And they were built long before Columbus ever set foot in the New World. The jungle may look untouched now, but for centuries, these lands were filled with life, human life, thriving, trading, building, fighting, praying, and then one day silence. But let's not jump ahead. Let's go back over 800 years, to a time when the Amazon wasn't a vast green void on the maps of European explorers, but a densely populated, beating heart of civilization. Imagine for a moment. No sounds of planes overhead, no chainsaws in the distance. Just the cries of macaws, the croaking of frogs, and the rhythmic chants of a distant ceremony echoing across the riverbanks. The air is heavy with moisture and the scent of wood smoke. Somewhere in the forest, a child is running through a raised stone causeway connecting his village to the nearby market square. That child is wearing a necklace of colorful feathers. His mother, weaving baskets of palm fiber, hums a tune as she works. His father, standing in the fields, is using a sharpened stone tool to shape the wooden handle of a hunting spear. This was the world of the Kahiku, a forgotten city near today's Xingu River. When Western archaeologists stumbled upon this area in the early 20th century, they dismissed the strange mounds and earthworks as natural features. It wasn't until modern technology, like LiDAR, cut through the forest canopy that we began to see the truth. Beneath the trees lay roads, bridges, canals, moats, ceremonial centers, and neighborhoods all interconnected across many square miles. It wasn't one city, it was a network, and they were not merely surviving in the jungle, they were shaping it. Let's stop here for a second. You might be wondering, how did they manage that? Wouldn't the Amazon be too wild, too chaotic, too infertile for such organization? Well, here's the thing, our assumptions were wrong. These people created their own soil. Yes, they engineered terra preta, or dark earth, a rich, fertile soil made from charcoal, compost, broken pottery, and other organic waste. This soil didn't just allow crops to grow. It lasted centuries, unlike the nutrient-poor dirt naturally found in most of the rainforest. They grew manioc, peppers, fruits, nuts. They raised guinea pigs and hunted tapirs. They fished the rivers with weighted nets made of plant fiber and bone. They didn't clear the jungle, they worked with it, modifying the landscape carefully and deliberately. Some areas were cleared for crops, but others were allowed to remain wild, filled with useful trees and medicinal plants planted generations before. But what about their homes? The people of Kahiku lived in circular wooden houses with thatched palm roofs, arranged in circles around open plazas. Each home was built to withstand heat and rain, elevated slightly to protect from flooding. The walls were woven from wood and sealed with clay, painted with dyes made from berries and bark. And what about entertainment or ritual or joy? We know they held festivals, large gatherings involving feasting, music, and dance. They played wind instruments made from river reeds and clay, and drums carved from hollow logs. Children painted their faces with red and black dyes. At night, torches lined the central plaza, casting flickering shadows as priests performed slow, rhythmic dances invoking spirits of sky and earth. These were people who believed they lived at the center of a balanced world, between the sky above and the river below. Their gods weren't angry or distant. They were present in the rustle of leaves, in the flow of water, in the glint of moonlight off a jaguar's eyes. Let's walk deeper. Imagine you are moving down one of the long, sunken roads they built, perfectly straight, stretching through the jungle for miles. You pass over small wooden bridges, walk beside canals they dug by hand, and eventually arrive at another city, connected through causeways and aligned with the stars. We don't know the names of these cities anymore. Time swallowed them, but we know they were there because the jungle remembers. We'll talk about why they disappeared later. But for now, listen to the rain tapping against massive leaves. The jungle is alive. And long before we knew what satellites were or imagined discovering lost civilizations on Mars, there were people here, hundreds of thousands of them, living, building, loving, feasting, and eventually vanishing. But nothing really disappears in the jungle. It just sleeps, and we've only just begun to wake it up. The jungle remembers. Even when stone is buried, when wood rots, when names are lost and languages fall silent, the earth keeps secrets. Roots grow over temples. Vines wrap around altars. But below all that, beneath centuries of growth and silence, the signs remain. Roads, walls, patterns that do not occur by accident. In the last part, we walked through the remains of Kahiku, one of the most sophisticated settlements in the Amazon basin. A civilization that engineered fertile soil, built complex infrastructure, and lived in harmony with the rainforest. But Kahiku was only one part of a much larger story. Let's move east now, toward the Tapajos River. It's morning. The mist is still rising off the surface of the water. You hear howler monkeys calling in the distance, the wing beats of toucans darting through the canopy. And as the sun filters through the leaves, it illuminates something strange. A geometric mound, perfectly shaped, too perfect to be natural. This is Belterra, and nearby Santrum. To the untrained eye, it's just another patch of forest. But once again, LiDAR surveys have shown something incredible. Rectangular plazas, moats, and interconnected road systems beneath the jungle floor. And here, too, we find more of that miraculous black earth. Terra preta, stretching across vast areas. These people weren't isolated. They traded. They moved goods over long distances using dugout canoes carved from giant trees, navigating the web of rivers like highways. They exchanged feathers, food, tools, even ideas. Ceramic fragments uncovered in this area show not only artistic sophistication but a shared visual language. Spirals, serpents, suns, repeated again and again across regions. And the pottery, it's breathtaking. Bright red slip, polished to a high sheen, decorated with intricate, incised patterns. Some show human faces, serene, staring. Others depict animals. Birds, frogs, jaguars. These weren't just cooking pots. Some were ceremonial. Others were burial urns, containing the remains of individuals honored and placed back into the earth with care. In this culture, death wasn't an end. It was a return. And every burial was a dialogue between the living and the land. But even with all we've uncovered, we've barely scratched the surface. The Amazon still holds the bones of hundreds, maybe thousands, of settlements. Some connected by straight sunken roads, others aligned with celestial events. At Parc Amazonien de Guyane in French Guiana, remnants of settlement mounds called Les Tumuli have been found. Low earthen domes clustered in patterns, their meaning still a mystery. In Bolivia's Llanos de Moxos, raised causeways run for miles through now seasonal wetlands, some even leading to star-shaped earthworks. They didn't build this all at once. Generations contributed, passing down knowledge orally. Grandmothers taught granddaughters which plants to mix for dyes. Fathers taught sons how to read the river and when to plant cassava. Every line drawn in the soil was the result of accumulated wisdom, a collective memory etched in the land. But let's go back into the life of an ordinary day. A woman wakes before dawn. She stirs the embers in the hearth and adds dry bark to coax the fire back to life. She boils manioc, stirs a thick porridge. Her youngest child is still asleep, wrapped in a woven hammock that sways gently from the breeze. Outside, the men are preparing for a hunt, painting their faces with red pigment from annatto seeds, tying charms of feathers to their spears. They believe the spirits of the forest protect them when properly honored. In the center plaza, the elders are already gathered. They sit cross-legged beneath a canopy of palm fronds, drinking chicha, a fermented maize drink, served in wide-mouthed bowls. Stories are shared, decisions made. A dispute over a fishing ground is resolved with a ceremonial dance, rather than violence. Respect is earned with wisdom, not conquest. And later in the day, a ceremony begins. The entire village gathers. Musicians sit in a semicircle, playing flutes with haunting, reedy tones. Dancers enter in pairs, dressed in jaguarskin tunics, their movements slow, hypnotic. A boy is being initiated into adulthood. He is led forward, presented with a carved wooden staff, and painted from head to toe in black dye made from the juniper fruit. His mother weeps quietly, not from sadness, but pride. Everything in this world had meaning. The stars were watched closely. The solstice marked a turning point in the planting season. The rivers dictated when people moved, when the turtles nested, when certain fruits would ripen. And above all, there was a sense of rhythm, a cycle of life that connected all things. So what happened? What could cause entire populations to vanish? Disease is one answer. When European explorers arrived, they didn't just bring metal tools and horses, they brought viruses. Smallpox, measles, influenza. These pathogens tore through native populations who had no immunity. It's estimated that over 90% of indigenous people in the Americas may have died in the first century of contact. But perhaps more tragic was the silence that followed. As people died, knowledge vanished. Oral histories stopped. Rituals were forgotten. Settlements were abandoned. The jungle reclaimed the cities. And with every passing decade, the memory of what had been there faded. When 19th century explorers entered the Amazon, they assumed it had always been a pristine wilderness. They looked at the dense jungle and thought, no one could have lived here in large numbers. But they were wrong. And now we are only beginning to understand just how wrong. And the story isn't over. We'll keep following the rivers. We'll uncover more traces. Because somewhere out there, beneath the silence, the cities are still waiting. The silence of the jungle is not truly silence. Even when no human voice echoes through the trees, the rainforest hums, softly, patiently. A low, living breath beneath the canopy. And if you listen long enough, you begin to sense it, the shape of what once was. Echoes beneath the vines, angles beneath the roots, the murmur of forgotten footsteps on paths no longer visible. So far, we've walked through the remains of Kahiku and Belterra. We've traced stone roads that vanish into overgrowth, and we've stood in circular plazas once filled with music, firelight, and ceremony. And we've glimpsed, however faintly, the people who called this place home. But this story runs deeper still. Let's travel now to Acre, a region in the western Amazon near the Bolivian border. For a long time, it was dismissed as empty, but satellites have revealed something strange. Enormous geometric patterns etched into the earth. Circles, squares, hexagons, some nearly 1,000 feet wide. Perfectly symmetrical, dug with tools, designed with purpose. They're called geoglyphs. From the sky, they look like symbols meant to be read from above. But who made them, and why? Archaeologists believe they date from 1000 to 1500 CE, roughly the same period as the European High Middle Ages. That means while castles were rising in France and cathedrals were stretching toward the heavens in Italy, people deep in the Amazon were carving sacred shapes into the land, guided by beliefs now lost to time. Let's step into that moment. It's late afternoon. The sun is dipping low, and shadows stretch long across the clearing. Men and women work together, digging a deep trench along a circular path. Children gather stones and drop them along the edges. Elders chant as they move, invoking spirits of wind and rain. At the center of the circle, a wooden totem rises, a carving of a serpent with eyes made of polished river stones. The soil is red here, rich with iron. Dust clings to their skin. Their feet are bare, hardened by decades of walking over forest paths. There are no beasts of burden, no metal tools. Everything is done by hand. But what they build is enormous, and the effort is shared, not commanded, not forced. It is sacred work. At night, they sit around fires. The stars above look different here, bright, sharp, close. An elder points to a constellation shaped like a jaguar and begins to speak. His story is long, without pause. It speaks of creation, of spirits, of promises made by the river. The children listen in silence, not out of fear, but reverence. In this culture, stories are not entertainment, they are architecture. They hold the world together. And in the morning, they rise and dig again. What were these geoglyphs used for? That's still debated. Some may have been ceremonial sites, others may have marked territories. A few seem to have astronomical significance, alignments with solstices or equinoxes. But what's certain is that they were not accidental. They were planned, organized, communal, and their scale suggests something we are only now beginning to accept. The Amazon was not wilderness, it was engineered. In the Llanos de Moxos region of Bolivia, thousands of raised fields stretch across a savanna that floods during the rainy season. These fields, called camelones, were built up over centuries. Heaps of earth with irrigation ditches dug around them to prevent crops from drowning. From the air, the landscape looks like a green tapestry of islands and canals. And here's the astonishing part. These weren't small family gardens. They supported entire populations, possibly tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of people. Cities without stone, without monuments, but with networks of food production so efficient they rivaled ancient Egypt. These people didn't conquer the jungle. They partnered with it. They built fish weirs, nets, and wooden structures placed across creeks to trap fish during seasonal floods. They grew crops adapted to wet conditions. They planted forest gardens, clusters of useful trees spaced out intentionally. Brazil nut, peach palm, cacao, guava. Each tree chosen, placed, remembered. Let's look closer at one of these communities. A woman stands in her raised field, waist deep in maize plants, their yellowing leaves rustling in the breeze. She tests the ears for ripeness, pulling one down, peeling it back. The kernels are full golden. She smiles. A few yards away, her son checks a wooden cage in the water. Inside, several fish are swimming, caught by a funnel trap that his grandfather showed him how to build. There is no written language, no formal maps, but nothing is forgotten. Every ridge, every planting cycle, every bird call is part of the memory passed down. They entertain themselves with song, flutes shaped like birds, drums made from hollowed logs covered in deer hide. Children chase each other through the shallow water. Grandmothers laugh while weaving baskets, telling stories of spirits that live in the clouds. This was life, not frozen in time, not backward, just different, complex in ways we're only now beginning to understand. And it all disappeared so fast. The first European reports of the Amazon were filled with wonder and contradiction. Spanish explorer Francisco de Orellana floated down the river in 1541 and claimed to see vast cities along the banks. He described warriors, markets, bridges. For centuries, his claims were dismissed as fantasy. But now, as the forest reveals its buried past, we realize Orellana may have been telling the truth. The cities were real, the people were real, and they lived lives filled with meaning, connection, and purpose. The jungle didn't erase them, it preserved them. And if we keep listening, keep digging, we might one day hear their voices again. The deeper we go, the more the forest shifts, not just in sound or scent, but in presence. Because the rainforest is not still. It is alive in ways we don't fully see. Branches grow where light breaks through, vines wrap around anything unmoving, and roots split stone like it's soft clay. But there's something else too, a quiet awareness. As though the jungle is watching and remembering, and what it remembers is us. In the last part, we walked along the ancient geoglyphs of Acre, followed the raised fields of the Bolivian savannas, and stepped into lives that once pulsed with ritual and rhythm. But now let's return to something more unsettling. What happens when a civilization so intricately woven into the forest begins to vanish? The end didn't come in a single moment. There was no great fire, no loud collapse. Instead, it arrived like a shadow, slow, creeping, invisible. The first signs may have been whispered by birds, who fell silent as sickness spread, or in the way the riverboats no longer came. Fewer traders, fewer stories, Then the songs stopped at night. The diseases brought by Europeans reached deep into the forest long before the people who carried them ever did. Entire villages disappeared within months. Ceremonial plazas became overgrown. Fire pits went cold. Hammocks were left hanging, swaying in empty rooms. But even in tragedy, the jungle kept its rhythm. It swallowed the roads. It hid the earthworks. It wrapped its green arms around everything, making the cities vanish without a sound. Now let's look at another region, a place called Marajo Island. Located at the mouth of the Amazon River, this island was once home to one of the most sophisticated pre-Columbian cultures in South America, the Marajora. For centuries, archaeologists thought it was too flooded, too wild, too harsh to support any large population. But in the late 20th century, that idea changed forever. Beneath the island's tangled brush lie burial mounds, causeways, ponds, canals, and massive pottery deposits. The Marajora people created ceramics with intricate, symmetrical patterns, some painted in bright red and black. Others were sculpted into faces and bodies, humans with bird wings, spirits with serpent tails, women in birthing poses, eyes closed in trance. These were not simple artifacts. They were masterpieces of spiritual expression. And what's more, their society showed signs of unusual complexity. Excavations suggest that Marajora culture may have had matrilineal inheritance. That is, lineage passed through the mother's side. Women possibly held positions of power. Their roles weren't just domestic. They may have been religious leaders, land stewards, decision-makers. Imagine a village on Marajo Island in its prime. A wide earthen mound rises above the floodplain. At the center, a ceremonial structure. A temple of woven wood and painted clay glows with torchlight. Inside, women in feathered cloaks chant around a central fire, grinding pigments from stone. Outside, the community prepares a feast. Fish wrapped in leaves roast on flat stones. Children run with slices of fruit in their hands. Laughter echoes across the water. There is a sense of balance here. The rivers rise and fall, and the people move with them. During flood season, they retreat to higher mounds. When the water's lower, they plant in the rich silt. Every motion has rhythm, and every rhythm has memory. They understood the land. They didn't just survive, they shaped it. Recent research suggests that Marajo may have supported upwards of 100,000 people, possibly more, across its peak. That number shatters previous assumptions about what was possible in a rainforest. And they weren't just surviving. They were organizing labor, practicing art, honoring ancestors, and managing water systems with knowledge so precise that modern engineers are still studying it. But again, silence came. After European contact, the Marajora disappeared. No great ruins were left behind because they didn't build in stone. Their cities were made of earth, of wood, of intention. And those materials, while impermanent to the eye, were deeply permanent in memory. Buried under trees, hidden in mounds, waiting to be noticed. It's easy to forget that not all greatness is loud. Some of the most advanced human systems were built without bronze or writing or cities of marble. They were grown, layer by layer, like the forest itself. Built by people who read the stars without charts, who mapped rivers in their minds, who raised generations in silence, until silence was all that remained. But even then, traces lingered. In the soil, in the layout of tree species that shouldn't grow naturally side by side, in the pottery shards unearthed by farmers, in the stories told by remote tribes who remember ancestors living in villages that stretched beyond the river. We once assumed they were myths. Now we know better, because as technology lets us peel back the canopy, through satellite imaging and LiDAR, we keep finding more. Cities without names, fields without fences, roads that go nowhere now, but once connected thousands. And it forces us to ask, what else have we forgotten? Because if the Amazon could hide entire civilizations, how many stories are still buried, right beneath our feet? Beneath every leaf, every mound, every ripple in the terrain, there's a question. Not the loud, obvious kind, but the quiet one that gnaws at the edge of history. What used to be here? And more importantly, who remembers it now? The deeper we go into the story, the more we realize how little we know. Not because there's no evidence, but because we weren't listening. For centuries, the myth of the untouched Amazon has shaped how we see the rainforest. A place without history, without civilization, a green void. But that myth is dissolving. Because every new scan of the forest floor, every aerial image, every unearthed ceramic fragment adds another thread to the forgotten web of Amazonian cities. And nowhere is this shift more dramatic than in recent discoveries made not by explorers with machetes, but by machines orbiting Earth. Let's talk about LiDAR, a technology that uses lasers to see through the forest canopy. When scientists began applying LiDAR scans to remote regions of the Amazon, especially in southern Colombia and northern Bolivia, what they found was staggering. Entire urban networks, grid-like street patterns, pyramidal platforms rising in the heart of the forest, fortifications, terraces, moats, not randomly scattered, but designed, engineered. Settlements aligned with the movements of the sun and stars. One of the most astonishing sights revealed is in the region of Las Lomas in Bolivia. There, deep within forested terrain long thought empty, lies a massive, pre-Columbian city network, complete with raised causeways stretching in straight lines for miles, connecting villages and ceremonial centers. Some of the causeways are wide enough to walk 10 across. Others are flanked by water management systems, ditches, ponds, and channels carved by hand. Think about that. A city in the forest. No stone walls, no steel tools, just earth, water, fire, and human will. The settlements themselves were made of large earthen mounds, sometimes up to 20 feet tall, arranged in clusters. Some were homes, others were ceremonial. Many were built on a foundation of terra preta, the engineered soil rich with charcoal and bone, the kind that still nourishes crops hundreds of years later. And these weren't isolated cases. Similar urban layouts have been uncovered in Mato Grosso, Xingu, Acre, Para, stretching over thousands of kilometers. Different groups, different languages, different rituals, but united in one thing: a relationship with the forest that was neither exploitative nor passive. It was cooperative, designed, cultural, and then, like before, it was erased. But let's not focus on what was lost just yet. Let's walk through what daily life may have looked like on one of those raised platforms in the early morning light. Picture a young woman waking before dawn. The air is still warm with the breath of the forest. She steps outside her family's roundhouse, its palm roof glistening with dew. The central fire is already lit. A neighbor stirs cassava mash in a clay pot. Across the village, children gather fruit from low branches: guava, camu, star apple. They laugh as parrots call from above. There is no rush, no machines, no alarms, but there is purpose. Men sharpen spears for fishing, wrapping the handles in woven fibers. Elders sit beneath a shaded awning, tracing symbols in the dirt. Maps not of land, but of relationships. Who was born when, who owes whom a favor, who belongs to which clan. The structure of society is remembered not in scrolls, but in stories, repeated every day, refined like ritual. By midday, the temperature rises. People retreat into the shade. Meals are shared: manioc flatbread, grilled fish wrapped in leaves, mashed fruit sweetened with forest honey. Infants sway gently in hammocks as the wind stirs through the canopy. Dogs sleep in the dirt. A pet capybara waddles between huts, sniffing for scraps. Then, as the sun lowers, the rhythm changes. Drums begin, soft at first, then steady. Women paint each other's arms with black dye, winding the designs in spirals and vines. The plaza fills with movement. This is not entertainment, it is alignment. Every motion, every chant, echoes a belief older than memory. That balance must be maintained. That spirit and soil are never far apart. What we see as ritual, they saw as living. What we see as primitive, they saw as necessary. And what we forgot, they once knew by heart. In our modern world, we often measure civilizations by stone monuments or written laws. But perhaps we've missed something more subtle. These cities didn't leave behind towering ruins because they didn't need to. Their greatness wasn't in how long their walls stood, but in how seamlessly they lived within their world. They mapped the stars without telescopes. They grew food in soil they made themselves. They built cities that breathed with the jungle instead of cutting through it. And they left behind traces, not to be admired, but to be remembered. Because this history isn't fiction. It's under the leaves. It's in the curve of an unnatural mound. It's in the silent line of a buried road that points directly at the rising sun. The cities are still here, not in the way we expect, but in the way the jungle never forgets. To most travelers, the Amazon seems eternal, unchanged, untouched, unknowable. A wall of green, but once you learn what lies beneath, you never see it the same way again. A bend in the river isn't just a bend. It's where a trade port once stood. A clearing in the forest isn't just nature's randomness. It's where a plaza echoed with voices, firelight, ceremony, and a row of strange trees growing in too perfect symmetry. That's not chance. That's a forgotten orchard. Planted, tended, passed down. We've been peeling back the canopy, one layer at a time. First with myth, then with map, now with machine. And with every glimpse, the story of the Amazon grows deeper, more complex, more human. In this part, we move farther into the Upper Tapajos Basin, one of the least explored areas of the Amazon, but a region that is beginning to reveal a remarkable past. Through satellite imagery and low-flying aircraft scans, researchers have begun identifying entire settlement clusters, villages arranged in galactic patterns. That's right. From above, these communities look like constellations, central plazas with smaller settlements radiating out like stars. Roads connect them in precise lines, crossing rivers, hills, forests. This isn't art. This is architecture. A civilization thinking on a massive scale, designing not just buildings but systems, networks, harmony. One site, known as Bawana, contains circular ditches hundreds of meters wide, likely used for rituals or community gatherings. Others show signs of fortified walls, defensive structures suggesting not only cooperation, but conflict. Because not all was peaceful. Like any human society, these cultures had moments of tension, rivalry, and risk. Let's pause here. Imagine standing at the edge of one of those ditches. The forest presses in around you, dense, humming with insect life. But the shape beneath your feet is unmistakably human. A perfect arc carved by hand centuries ago. Your boots sink slightly into black earth, and you notice, scattered along the slope, small fragments of pottery. Some are smooth and red. Others show carved lines, fingerprints preserved in clay. What were these people doing here? Let's step into their lives for a moment. It's evening. A storm is brewing, wind curling through the tree canopy. Inside one of the village's longhouses, a family gathers close around a fire. The flames dance across painted wooden masks mounted on the walls. A boy holds a small clay jar in his lap, turning it over, admiring the spirals pressed into its side. His grandmother leans forward and begins to chant. Not in words he fully understands yet, but in rhythm. The rhythm tells the story. Outside, hunters return from the forest, carrying bundles wrapped in palm leaves, fresh kill, fruits, roots. They leave the offerings near the ceremonial pole in the plaza before joining the others inside. Lightning flickers, but no one flinches. This is a known pattern, a trusted sky. Later that night, the plaza will fill. There will be dance. Not celebration exactly, but restoration. A cycle being honored. Everyone will wear paint. Everyone will move together. The storm will pass. The memory will remain. Now step back. Look at what they left behind. We're not just finding homes. We're finding infrastructure. Reservoirs carved into earth to catch and store rainwater. Roads raised above flood levels with perfect slope. Terraces designed for slope farming. Fish ponds, still visible, still used by locals in some regions. And more black earth, terra preta, deeper and richer than anything natural. Some believe the production of this soil may have even been intentional on a civilizational scale. Imagine that a culture whose waste management system was so efficient, so sustainable, that it created land richer than any synthetic fertilizer can provide today. And yet, we only learned of it in the last 60 years. How much else have we missed? Let's go even deeper beyond geography, because these cities weren't just physical. They were spiritual. In the oral traditions of many indigenous Amazonian groups, there are stories of sky cities, of ancestral people who lived in great villages before being swallowed by the forest. Some refer to a time when the land was smooth and the roads were clear. Some of these stories describe songs that could shape the weather, drums that guided fish, ceremonies that aligned with the stars. We tend to dismiss this as mythology, but consider this: the city layouts did follow star patterns. Their planting cycles did align with solstices. Their roads did reflect solar paths. Maybe the old stories aren't stories at all. Maybe they're memories. We've seen this in other ancient cultures. The Dogon of Mali, who knew of stars invisible to the eye. The Polynesians, who sailed across the Pacific without compasses. The Mayans, who tracked Venus with calendar precision. So why not the Amazon? Why not a civilization whose history was sung instead of carved? But that's the challenge. Because we've based so much of our idea of advanced civilization on stone, metal, and monuments. And here in the jungle, everything was biodegradable. Wood rots, clay crumbles, fiber returns to soil, but the shape of the city, the geometry, the intention that lingers, we have only begun to trace the edges of the forgotten Amazonian world. The story isn't complete. In fact, it's just beginning. And if we keep listening, not just to the data, but to the ground, the trees, the people who still live in the shadow of those cities, we might not just find ruins. We might find answers. But what truly set this city apart was not the complexity of its aqueducts, the shape of its plazas, or even the height of its temple towers. It was what the people chose to fill their lives with that marked the soul of this civilization. These weren't merely engineers or hunters. They were thinkers, musicians, sculptors, astronomers, healers. This was not a savage jungle tribe, as was once lazily assumed by early explorers who never set foot deeper than the riverbanks. No, this was a society that carved meaning into stone, that aligned its daily life with the pulse of the earth and sky. From early morning, the city stirred not with chaotic noise, but with orchestrated rhythm. The soft ring of obsidian chimes swayed in the humid breeze, signaling the time to gather. Children followed their elders barefoot along mosaic paths inlaid with polished quartz, their feet brushing against ancient symbols that no one today has fully deciphered. At the city's center, a round stone dais acted as both a sundial and ceremonial stage. There, under the filtered jungle light, priests, draped in brilliant feathers and jaguar skins, gathered not to frighten the people with curses or superstition, but to tell stories that had been passed down for generations. And the stories, they weren't just legends of gods and monsters, although there were many of those. They were coded histories of migration, of drought, of triumph, of war, all encrypted within metaphors involving celestial beasts, serpents of wind, and trees that walked at night. The people gathered around these tales not passively, but with reverence and interaction. Children acted out the parts. Elders debated their meanings. It was, in a way, both theater and philosophy. In the quieter parts of the day, workshops came to life. Pottery wheels spun in long, narrow huts where the walls were painted with vivid murals. Scenes of jungle hunts, strange animals with too many eyes, or boats sailing into the clouds. Young artists used dyes made from beetles, roots, and rare orchid petals. Sculptors chiseled likenesses of hummingbirds into soft river stones, while others carved calendars into enormous cedar planks, each glyph shaped with surgical precision. Because as vibrant as this civilization had been, something still happened. Something gradual, something irreversible. Over time, the outer terraces became overgrown. The murals faded. Fewer voices echoed in the plazas. The drums became silent. But the most puzzling thing? There were no signs of war. No evidence of fires or invaders. No mass graves or burnt temples. The disappearance wasn't loud. It was quiet, almost chosen. And this is where we begin to unravel the strangest theory of all. one that has only recently gained traction among the most open-minded scholars. A theory suggesting that this city didn't fall to disaster, but hid itself deliberately. Not with traps or walls, but with silence. With the jungle itself. But how, and more importantly why, would an entire society choose to vanish? Let's keep digging. And yet, even as the sun disappeared behind the thick canopy and the green twilight of the forest returned, something in the air shifted. Not the wind, there was none. It was the stillness, an unnatural quiet, as if the jungle itself had paused to remember, or perhaps to warn. They say that the jungle forgets nothing, that it keeps every secret whispered between its leaves, every footstep that has pressed into its wet soil, every life that once thrived and then vanished. And on this night, surrounded by those stone faces carved in expressions both human and alien, you could almost hear the breath of the forgotten cities. The explorers, and I use that term loosely, for they were far more than mapmakers or scientists, had begun to develop routines, though nothing in this place was ever routine. They woke with the sun, always groggy from the humidity, their clothes damp even before breakfast, and they'd share stale plantains or thin maize porridge from battered tin bowls, often in silence, each person still turning over the images from the night before. The sounds of the jungle, the distant cough of a jaguar, the high-pitched scream of howler monkeys, the endless orchestra of insects, had woven themselves into their dreams. Sometimes those dreams were of the cities they'd seen. Enormous stepped pyramids overgrown with orchids, water channels carved with such precision that not even a blade of grass grew between the joints. And other times, those dreams were darker. As they pressed deeper, they found evidence of a structured society that defied the common assumption of primitive tribes scattered without order. The cities, though swallowed by roots and vines, were built with intention. There were open squares at the center of each, likely used for trade or ceremony, surrounded by what could only be described as housing blocks, each nearly identical, suggesting a kind of egalitarianism. But the deeper into each city they ventured, the stranger the architecture became. In one, they found a spiraled temple with walls completely covered in metallic flecks. Not gold, though it shimmered like it, but something unidentifiable, resistant even to their small tools. In another, there was an amphitheater carved into a hill, where the acoustics were so precise that a whisper in the center could be heard from the top seats, hundreds of feet away. And the artwork, the reliefs, though weather-worn, depicted scenes of what seemed to be both myth and memory. There were processions of men in elaborate feathered robes, holding strange tools and gesturing toward the skies. Serpents with multiple heads devouring stars. Women with jaguar faces dancing around bonfires. In one especially detailed carving, an enormous being, not quite man, not quite animal, appeared to emerge from a tree, surrounded by kneeling figures offering up maize and fruit and what looked disturbingly like human hearts. Whether these were gods, rulers, or something else entirely was never clear. But perhaps most intriguing and disturbing were the water systems. Every city had one. Not mere wells or rain-catching pots, but massive aqueducts and underground cisterns that remained remarkably intact. And in every case, the water was routed not only to homes and communal baths, but to what appeared to be ceremonial pools. These weren't for drinking, they were for something else. Some of these pools were dyed black with some sort of mineral, others glowed faintly at night, though no one could explain why. When one explorer, a geochemist named Davis, took a sample from the luminescent pool, he noticed the liquid shimmered even inside his sealed vial. And then, 2 days later, he stopped speaking. He didn't go mad, at least not in any way that could be immediately diagnosed. But his silence was deliberate, almost reverent, as though he'd heard something in the water he wasn't ready to repeat. He simply stopped engaging with the others. He spent his days sitting near the edges of the temple ruins, sketching obsessively in his notebook, curving symbols, geometries that didn't obey traditional mathematics, grids and circles and lines that connected to nothing. The team debated returning him to base camp, but Davis refused to leave. He stayed behind with a local guide named Moreau when the rest moved on to another site 3 miles east. That was the last time they saw either of them. By now, you're probably asking the same question that plagued the researchers each night. Who built these cities? Who lived here? And why did they vanish? Here's where the story begins to tangle with theories, some reasonable, others less so. You see, carbon dating placed many of the larger structures at over 2,000 years old. But certain artifacts, small tools, statues, and pieces of ceramic with strange metallic filigree, seemed far more recent, by as much as 1,000 years, which suggests one of two things. Either these cities were reused by successive civilizations, or someone had returned to them long after they were abandoned. And the evidence increasingly pointed to the latter. You could see it in the newer inscriptions etched over older ones, in the strange mixture of languages, a blend of known Amazonian dialects and something that resembled Proto-Mayan script but didn't quite match. One section of wall had a repeating phrase, scrawled dozens of times in rows, always next to a symbol that looked like a pair of eyes encased in flame. It was translated loosely as, "the ones who watch beneath." Now, even in the driest of academic circles, such a phrase raises eyebrows. And it wasn't just writing. There were remnants of small altars at the edge of several temple complexes, offerings of fruit and feathers, bones wrapped in cloth, tiny totems carved from what appeared to be black coral. These were not ancient. Some were less than 100 years old, meaning someone had been here recently, and they were still performing rituals. To what, or for what, that no one could answer. But there was something even more haunting than the altars. The city they entered next had no name. No one had mapped it. It was hidden beneath a stretch of land so densely packed with trees that not even satellite imagery had pierced it. They found it only because one of their guides, an old man named Lazaro, said he heard the trees whispering and followed the sound. Laugh if you like, but that's how it happened. And what they found inside that city would change the direction of the entire expedition. But we'll get there soon, because there's something you need to understand first. Something about the dreams they all began to have. The months passed in a slow, unchanging rhythm. The camp, once full of excitement and the clamor of discovery, had settled into a silent routine, each day blurring gently into the next. The rain fell as it always had, warm, steady, endlessly drumming on canvas and leaf, blurring the line between time and memory. At night, the mist rolled in like smoke over the canopy, and their lanterns flickered dimly as shadows danced on the moss-covered stones. By now, their efforts had revealed far more of the buried city. Under layers of mud and root, a complex network of structures emerged, arranged with symmetry and purpose. Some resembled ceremonial plazas, circular, open spaces framed by low stone steps and steely carved with spirals, jaguars, and faces with unnaturally wide eyes. Other buildings were long, rectangular halls with central altars made of polished greenstone, their surfaces scorched as if by ritual flame. The most fascinating, however, were the elevated roads. Long, raised causeways that reached far into the jungle, disappearing into the trees. Built from crushed white limestone and clay, they resisted the jungle's attempts to consume them. From above, they resembled spokes of a wheel, all radiating from a central mound the size of a small stadium. That central mound had now become the focus of their study. Each morning, the team would rise at first light, their clothes still damp from the night air, and make their way to the mound. There, they used hand tools to remove layers of soil and vines, revealing stone stairways so steep they seemed designed not for walking, but for climbing with reverence. The air around the mound always felt heavy, as if it remembered the weight of forgotten footsteps. Inside the structure, they uncovered a chamber with no windows, lit only by the golden slats of morning light that spilled through cracks in the ceiling. Along the walls were painted glyphs, not like anything in known Mayan or Incan systems. These were angular, almost geometric, and depicted a progression. A serpent swallowing the sun, a tree growing upside down, a man with no face standing before a circle of fire. It was in this chamber that they discovered what they first believed to be burial urns. But when opened, they revealed no human remains. Instead, the containers held bundles of dried herbs, intricate bone carvings, and tightly rolled textiles embroidered with tiny, iridescent feathers. The scent that rose from the vessels was earthy and pungent, like cedar and ash. Elena, the linguist, became obsessed with the painted symbols. Day and night she transcribed them, her notebooks now filled with sketches and speculative translations. She believed the site wasn't merely a city. It was a sanctuary, a sacred place used in cycles that corresponded with solar and lunar events. According to her interpretations, the people who lived here believed they had descended from the stars. They called themselves the ones who listen when the earth speaks. Meanwhile, the local guides grew restless. Some refused to return to the chamber after the urns were opened. They spoke of los susurros, the whispers, which they claimed could be heard at night among the stones. Quiet murmurs that rose and fell with the wind, never clear, but never absent. Despite this, the excavation pressed on. Supplies arrived once a month via boat, and the jungle, despite its hazards, became a strange kind of home. Their meals were simple: salted fish, plantain cakes, and thick soups made from jungle roots and wild herbs. In the evenings, they shared stories around a small fire, their voices low, respectful of the darkness. But it was during one of these quiet nights that something changed. One of the team, a cartographer named Luis, failed to return after a solo mapping trip north of the site. They searched for 3 days, through dense forest, over rivers, calling his name into the green silence. His compass and notebook were found beneath a ceiba tree, pages torn and soaked. In his notes, hastily written in the margins, was one phrase repeated again and again: "The city breathes." From that moment on, something in the air seemed different. Not dangerous, not yet, but different. Like the jungle was awake, watching, and still deeper into the ruins they went. The jungle, though draped in morning mist and bathed in golden shafts of sunlight, was never truly silent. Beneath the canopy where light struggled to reach, sounds moved like ghosts, unseen but always present. Insects whispered in the stillness, birds called from unseen branches, and sometimes, just sometimes, it felt as if the trees themselves were breathing. And it was here, in this living cathedral of green, that the bloodstone rituals took place. The name sounds dramatic now and perhaps frightening, but to the people of the city, scholars believe it may have been called a culmina. The rituals were sacred, rhythmic, and vital. They were not violent, not by their understanding. The blood referred to wasn't necessarily human. It was symbolic, more often drawn from cuts on the palms during ceremonial dances or from sacrificed animals treated with reverence. The bloodstone itself, a polished slab of deep red jasper, sat at the heart of the central plaza, aligned with both the sun's zenith and the equinox moonrise. On certain days of the year, when both celestial bodies were in harmony, the elders would lead the people in a dance around the stone. The air would be thick with the aroma of crushed cacao beans, burning copal resin, and freshly picked orchids. The participants, dressed in garments woven with gold thread and decorated with parrot feathers, would paint their faces in intricate spirals of ochre and ash. Their chants rose slowly, building like the crescendo of a hidden river, and as they moved, their sweat, blood, and breath joined in a communion with the jungle itself. They believed that without this ritual, the forest would forget them, that the vines would reclaim the temples, the rivers would rise against their walls, and the animals would turn wild once more. They were not wrong. This bond between human and jungle was delicate, more fragile than we often assume. And yet, this sacred link began to fray. It started, perhaps, when the obsidian mirrors cracked. These mirrors, placed in sanctuaries and aligned with the sun's light, were believed to channel energy from the gods. The priests would gaze into them seeking visions. But one by one, without warning, they began to split. Not shattered by impact, but sliced from within, as if pressure had grown too great. The priests, disturbed and unable to interpret the omens, grew restless. The following harvest was smaller. The river ran cloudier. Children spoke of dreams where the trees had eyes, and vines reached out like fingers. The birds flew in strange patterns, forming spirals and loops that no one had seen before. And during one ritual, the bloodstone itself, untouched for centuries, grew warm beneath the dancers' feet. Some believed it was the gods growing angry. Others feared something older, something forgotten, had begun to wake. Then came the disappearance. It was a girl, barely 12, who vanished after the midsummer ritual. She had danced at the edge of the circle, wearing a crown of orchid petals, laughing as she spun beneath the stars. But in the morning, her bed was undisturbed, her footprints ending at the foot of a stone idol near the plaza's edge. They searched the jungle for days, burning incense, leaving offerings, whispering her name to the trees, but she was gone, and her absence was only the beginning. One by one, each full moon, someone would vanish, always near the bloodstone, always after a ritual, and each time, the jungle seemed darker, more alive, as if it had claimed them. Some elders warned the people to stop the ceremonies, to close the temples and hide the stones. But the high priest, devoted and terrified in equal measure, insisted that stopping would invite worse. To an outsider, it may sound like superstition, but the signs were there. The vines near the bloodstone grew unnaturally fast. Birds refused to perch on the surrounding temples. Even the jaguars, normally so feared, began avoiding the city center. The people whispered that the jungle had become hungry, not for blood, but for memory. You might wonder why they didn't flee. Why stay in a city turning against them? Because to them, the jungle was not the enemy. It was a god, parent, a living force they had lived with and honored for centuries. And when the gods turn their faces away, when nature grows quiet, it is not always wise to run. Sometimes it's safer to listen, to stay very still, to watch. But watching came with a price, for the jungle had begun watching back. And deeper within its vast green body, past vines thicker than a man's torso and roots older than pyramids, something waited. Something that had not stirred for generations. Something the ancients had once feared so deeply, they built entire temples to keep it buried. And now the stones were starting to shift. Next, we'll explore what was hidden beneath the central temple of Akulmina, and what the last priest saw when he dared enter the sealed chamber at the base of the bloodstone altar. The jungle began to shift around them in tone and mood. What once felt like a protective canopy now seemed to lean in closer, pressing in with a quiet intensity. The expedition members, though experienced and accustomed to the wild, were beginning to feel the emotional toll of the journey. Their steps were slower now, not just because of the terrain, but because of the weight of everything they had seen. Insects chirped at unfamiliar pitches. The air had a different kind of stillness, almost anticipatory. They were deeper now, past the bounds of mapped terrain, into a place that had not been walked by outsiders for generations, if ever. And then the forest broke, not in a dramatic crash or sudden clearing, but with a gentle softening of the underbrush, a thinning of the vines. The light filtered through in broader shafts, and the team found themselves stepping into what could only be described as a forgotten courtyard. Large stones, intricately carved with curling vines and angular figures, formed walls and broken platforms. These weren't mere rocks displaced by time. They were remnants of architecture, designed and deliberate. The leader of the expedition, a quiet man with a background in epigraphy, knelt beside one of the stones. He brushed away the moss and earth with his gloved hand, revealing a pattern that repeated in multiple locations, an interlocking motif of jaguar claws, rain spirals, and maize stalks. This wasn't Incan. It wasn't Mayan. It was something else entirely, a culture hidden beneath layers of foliage and centuries of forgetting. They set up camp nearby, not out of necessity, but reverence. Felt wrong to simply pass through. That night, they built a fire from dry palm fronds and hardwood twigs, and shared their meager rations. Boiled yucca with salt, dried plantains, and a thin stew of lentils and river herbs. As the flames flickered against the ancient walls, shadows danced across the carvings, bringing them to life in eerie silhouette. One figure, taller than the others and marked with a headdress of feathers and stone, seemed to stare back at them from the darkness. Sleep came slowly. The jungle did not rest when they did. Howler monkeys called from afar, and the deep groan of shifting branches echoed like the creak of old doors. At times, it almost sounded like voices, faint, rhythmic murmurs in the canopy. But no one dared to say anything aloud. To speak it might give it form. In the morning, they ventured deeper into the ruins. The layout was strange, not in the sense of disorganization, but in a logic that didn't align with any known city plans. Houses were arranged in spirals rather than rows, and central plazas were sunken rather than raised. They found ceremonial pits filled with shards of obsidian tools and carved wooden masks, long since softened by rot but still recognizable. And then they saw it, the Temple of Breath, as they would later call it. It stood taller than any of the surrounding structures, its base carved directly into the side of a limestone outcrop, with long, winding steps leading upward. Vines draped over its entrance like curtains, and large tree roots had pushed through its walls, as if trying to reclaim it. Inside the temple, the air changed. It was cool and dry, almost unnaturally so, and it carried with it the scent of age, dust, stone, and the faint sweetness of decayed incense. Along the inner walls were murals, perfectly preserved in patches, showing scenes of daily life and myth. One panel showed a procession of dancers wearing bird masks and wielding staffs topped with glowing stones. Another depicted a ritual around a fire, with figures bowing before a massive obsidian mirror that reflected not themselves, but jaguars. There was no treasure in the traditional sense. No gold, no jade. But there were stories, etched in pigment and stone. There were bones, carefully placed, undisturbed, their arrangement suggesting reverence rather than tragedy. And in one chamber, they found something that would haunt the team for weeks. A circle of child-sized stools, each carved with unique faces, arranged around a central stone drum. It wasn't just a place of worship. It had been a school, a gathering place, a site of community. As they explored, the expedition members grew quiet. There was awe, yes, but also a strange sense of being watched. Not maliciously, but attentively. Like the jungle itself was taking note of their presence. Birds no longer called nearby. The insects had moved on. And when they left offerings of fruit and water at the base of the temple, more out of instinct than protocol, the jungle responded. That night, the air was calm. The fire burned clean. And for the first time in days, they slept deeply. But not all of them. One team member, a woman named Carla, had dreamt vividly. In her sleep, she had walked through the temple corridors, guided by a figure wrapped in feathers and light. He spoke no words, yet she understood his meaning. You have seen what you must, but there is more, much more. She awoke with tears in her eyes and a single phrase stuck in her mind. Ayakara, a word she did not know, but which pulsed with meaning. In the coming days, they would discover that this city, this spiral sanctuary, was only the edge of something far larger, something deeper, not just physically but historically. This wasn't one lost city. It was part of a chain, a network of civilizations hidden beneath the green veil of the rainforest, waiting to whisper their secrets to those who dared to listen long enough. And they were just getting started. And as night fell again over the endless canopy, Diego lit his small clay lamp and leaned closer to the wall where the painted figures danced, now almost speaking to him. He could not sleep. The images still burned in his thoughts. What kind of civilization had lived here so long ago? And how had they disappeared without a trace? By morning, the camp was already stirring. A faint mist hugged the damp forest floor, and the birds above seemed louder than usual. Miguel had found something. He rushed into camp, face flushed and eyes wide. Without speaking, he motioned for the team to follow. They moved fast, machetes clearing thick branches until suddenly, the trees parted and a massive flat stone emerged, tilted and cracked with vines bursting through the seams. It wasn't just a rock. It was a road. Not a path, this was deliberate. Broad stone slabs laid in calculated alignment, stretching forward into the green shadows. It was part of a causeway. The archaeologists froze. These kinds of roads only existed in the oldest stories of the Amazon. Tales passed through generations of indigenous groups, whispered at firesides of golden cities connected by roads wide enough for entire processions of priests and warriors. The road continued for over half a mile before dipping into a ravine where a collapsed stone bridge lay in ruin. At its height, this must have been a grand entrance, perhaps leading to a central temple or ceremonial district. Yet nothing remained but the debris of carved stone, each slab etched with faded patterns resembling snakes, stars, and rivers. They camped near the broken bridge that night. Around the fire, Diego spoke quietly, almost to himself. This isn't just one city. These were networks, kingdoms, maybe. Look how far this extends. Back in the lab tent, Karina was working under dim light. She had found a small golden ornament wedged between the roots of a nearby fig tree. A pendant shaped like a jaguar's face, with obsidian eyes and a loop for a necklace. But it wasn't the jaguar that intrigued her. It was the strange script carved into the back. Glyphs, not Inca, not known Mayan either. Something in between, like a forgotten dialect or maybe a fusion language lost to time. The next morning brought a silence to the jungle that was almost eerie. No birds, no insects, just stillness. Miguel pointed it out first. The animals know something. They laughed it off, but unease lingered. As they followed the causeway further north, the trees thinned out, and then, unexpectedly, the jungle opened into a wide clearing. A plaza, massive, circular, and surrounded on all sides by low stone structures. Their walls collapsed inward but still standing. It was unmistakably a civic center. At one point, it had been full of people. They imagined it alive with music, chants, and firelight. Bones of ancient hearths still marked the plaza's edge. Stone seats, carved from a single block, lined the ring, possibly for elders or judges. And in the center, a strange platform. Flat, smooth, blackened as if by fire, but not damaged. Almost ceremonial. Diego whispered, "This wasn't just a city. It was the heart of something sacred." He stepped onto the platform. Beneath his feet, the stone gave a soft creak. He paused, looked down. There was a crack, just a faint one, but shaped like a perfect rectangle. A trapdoor? They worked quickly, brushing aside vines and debris until the outline became obvious. With careful pressure, they lifted the slab. A shaft, descending into darkness, and at the bottom, a glimmer of gold. It was a chamber, a crypt. The air that rose from it was dry and ancient, too dry for the jungle. A sealed place, a tomb perhaps, but not like any they'd ever seen. The walls were lined with long, narrow bas-reliefs showing lines of people walking in ceremonial procession. Some held staffs. Others bore what looked like scrolls, tablets, and bound packages, secrets, offerings. In the center, raised slightly above the floor, a sarcophagus. Tall, narrow, covered in carved vines and serpent-like patterns. But no name, no symbols of rank. Just one image at the top of the lid, an open eye. It watched them. Karina said nothing, but her hand trembled slightly as she reached out to touch the stone. Then, a distant crack of thunder. No clouds above, just sky. But the wind had changed. Something had shifted. Something old had stirred. And they were no longer just explorers uncovering ruins. They were guests in a forgotten city, standing on sacred ground. To be continued. As we moved deeper into the overgrown heart of the jungle, following the fading stone path that had once been a well-walked thoroughfare, we reached a portion of the lost city that had remained hidden from explorers for centuries. Massive buttress roots of ancient trees embraced stone houses like protective arms, growing through windows and archways, as if the forest had decided long ago to reclaim what once belonged to men. We passed beneath a towering stone arch covered in thick layers of moss and flowering vines, and beyond it, the remnants of a ceremonial plaza came into view, flattened and eerily symmetrical, still echoing the structure of some long-lost plan. At the center stood a crumbled ziggurat-like temple, partially collapsed but still grand in form, its staircases leading to nowhere. In this sacred area, we found signs that this may have been the very core of the city, the spiritual and administrative seat of the forgotten civilization. Carvings on the remaining columns suggested gatherings, processions, and rituals. One relief depicted a line of people carrying wide platters of roasted fruits, fish, and wild birds, ascending toward the temple steps. Their heads were adorned with woven crowns, and their bodies painted in patterns of dots and lines. likely using dyes from jungle flowers or tree bark. Food was a central part of their culture, that much was clear. We found countless shards of pottery that once held dishes flavored with chili, lime, and ground seeds. Ancient mortars and pestles were scattered among the stones, worn smooth from years of crushing cassava roots and annatto seeds. And beneath the floor of one nearby chamber, we discovered a storage pit that still held the remains of dried grains sealed away with hardened tree sap. Somehow, the jungle heat and dampness hadn't managed to entirely spoil the remnants, leaving behind a whisper of flavor in the air. Smoky, earthy, unfamiliar. Further into the plaza, we came across an unexpected find. A semicircular stone amphitheater carved into the slope of a small hill, its benches carefully chiseled and arranged in a perfect arc facing a flat, raised platform. This wasn't merely a place for worship, it was a theater, a school, or perhaps a court of law. Here, the city's orators may have spoken. Their judges might have ruled. Their children perhaps learned stories passed down for generations. Tales of their ancestors' arrival by canoe, their victories in war, and the gods who blessed the rivers and trees. We couldn't stop staring at the fine etchings on the stage's front wall. Figures in dramatic poses, arms wide, mouths open mid-speech, surrounded by glyphs that danced like flames. No one has ever decoded them, but their repetition across buildings and monuments suggests they were more than decorative. They carried meaning, maybe names, prayers, or entire speeches immortalized in stone. One of our archaeologists noticed something odd. A series of flat, carved stones arranged like a track. These weren't ceremonial. They had a functional wear to them, as though something heavy had been dragged over them for decades. We followed the line and were led out of the plaza and into a dense corridor of trees and hanging moss, where the stones dipped downward. We realized we were heading into a sunken area, a basin hidden under layers of green. What we found next changed everything. As we descended, the sound of dripping water grew louder until we stood at the edge of a massive reservoir. A man-made lake, walled by stone, fed by a series of narrow channels carved through the rocks. The civilization had engineered a system to catch, store, and distribute water, even in the dry season. This wasn't just a tribe, it was an organized society with the intelligence to manipulate nature in its favor without destroying it. Floating lilies still bloomed in the reservoir, and the water glowed with a greenish hue under the light that trickled in through the leaves above. Birds nested nearby, and frogs croaked in a slow, rhythmic cadence, as if remembering the sounds of the people who once lived here. It was clear. This lost city wasn't simply hidden. It had been erased. Not by accident, not by time, but by force. Something had happened here. Something violent or fearful enough to make thousands disappear. We pressed on. The jungle hadn't given up all its secrets yet. The rainy season had returned to the forest, and with it, the air grew heavy and warm, as if the jungle itself was breathing more deeply. The people of Ruk-Ux-Keej, the once forgotten city now reawakening through the cracks of time and vine, knew this season not just as a shift in weather but as a sacred time. For them, the rains were not merely water falling from the sky. They were gifts from Chak, the rain god, the keeper of storms and fertility, the one who whispered to the roots beneath the soil and coaxed the fruit from the trees. Each day began not with sudden movement, but with a ritual stillness. As the mist clung to the mossy walls of their homes and the calls of howler monkeys echoed through the high canopy, the people lit thick bundles of resinous wood that smoldered and scented the air with the fragrance of copal. Women gathered near the central plaza, faces streaked with earth-colored pigment, laying out woven mats on which to prepare the offerings. Maize cakes, cacao paste, and roasted jungle yams, arranged in perfect circles. These ceremonies were not grand or loud, but they had a still gravity to them, like the slow orbit of the stars. Everyone knew their role. Everyone remembered. It was in this season that the youngest children were taught how to listen to the forest. Not just to hear it, but to truly understand it. The way the cicadas grew louder before a thunderstorm, or how certain vines twisted themselves tighter when rain was coming. Elder women with faces like carved would lead small groups into the undergrowth, pointing to a leaf's underside, or the strange bruised color of a mushroom. They passed on knowledge without parchment or stone, only with voice and gesture, trusting that memory, too, could become a kind of architecture. In these months, hunters set out at dawn, not with weapons of war but with quiet reverence, blending with the shadows. They wore woven tunics darkened with charcoal dust, allowing them to slip between trees unnoticed by prey. Their targets were not chosen at random, only animals that had shown signs, omens interpreted by the dream readers. A peccary crossing the village path at night, a parrot repeating a forgotten name. The meat was shared communally, as were the stories of the chase, told not to glorify the hunter, but to honor the balance between hunger and humility. Children, after their lessons, would climb the strangler fig trees that towered high into the canopy, their branches like ancient arms holding up the sky. There, they'd find the woven platforms built by older boys and girls, secret places strung between the branches, where they told stories of the sky serpent, traded carved stones, and whispered of things they'd seen near the river. Sometimes, they swore they saw the stone heads of other cities buried in the mud, or caught the glimmer of obsidian in a tree hollow. Whether truth or tale, these whispers passed through the forest like wind. The builders, too, had work to do. The rains softened the earth, made it pliable, and it was during this time that new earthworks were constructed. Mud brick walls rose slowly, packed by hand, layered with crushed shell and river gravel. They did not build high during the wet months. Height belonged to the dry season, but they shaped paths, widened canals, and dug great cisterns. These reservoirs would gleam like black mirrors when the rain came, capturing the sky itself and storing it below. Birds bathed in them, children dipped their toes, and elders stared into their depths, murmuring the names of those who came before. It was during one of these cloudy, dripping days that a young apprentice, barely past his initiation, discovered something half-buried near the base of a collapsed ziggurat. He'd been assigned to collect medicinal vines from a particular tree that was known to weep yellow sap, when he noticed a curve of stone that didn't match the roots. Brushing away the moss, he revealed a carved edge, intricate and looping, like the curves of a snake devouring itself. Others came to help, and together they unearthed a circular stone door, sealed for who knows how long. The city paused, elders conferred, while the spiritual leaders burned offerings to ask the ancestors whether the seal should be broken. Dreams were consulted, and stars observed. Finally, with careful ritual, they opened it, and found within a narrow stairwell spiraling down into the earth, so cold and dry it seemed untouched by centuries. The walls were covered in murals, still bright despite the years, showing a people not unlike them, but wearing different headdresses, shaped like jaguar skulls. These images spoke of rituals involving flame and mirrors, of gods with burning eyes, and of a final ceremony deep underground. They called this place the Undertemple, and it became a site of reverence, but also of mystery. Not all dared to enter. Some said they felt watched there, though no eyes were seen. Others swore they heard humming from the stones, like the slow breath of the jungle itself, waiting. The priests decided that only a few would be allowed inside, and only during certain moon phases, when the balance between the living and the unseen was most harmonious. And so the city grew outward while the mysteries deepened inward. Above ground, life continued with rhythm and purpose, weaving, planting, singing, and studying the skies. Below, secrets stirred slowly in the darkness, whispering of times even older, of cities forgotten not just by man, but by the forest itself. And while the rains fell, and the roots dug deeper, the people of Rukux-Keej waited, quietly, for the next sign. Night fell slowly over the jungle, and with it came a dense mist that curled between the towering kapok trees, softening the sharp outlines of the ruins and swallowing sound as though the forest itself refused to let noise escape. The explorers, now reduced to a smaller and quieter group after several had left due to illness or unease, lit small, smokeless fires, careful not to attract attention from whatever might still be moving beyond the trees. Their hammocks, suspended between the roots and vines, swayed slightly in the humid breeze, and above them, the stars pierced through holes in the canopy like distant, ancient eyes. By now, weeks had passed since they first set foot on the overgrown stone path, and the once unshakable confidence of modern gear and academic arrogance had given way to something else, something resembling awe, mixed with a fear that was hard to name. In the heart of the jungle, certainty evaporated quickly. The birds didn't sing near the ruins, the frogs croaked somewhere far away, but closer in, the jungle was strangely quiet. The latest site they had discovered was unlike the others. While the first few cities, if one could still call them that, had been clusters of stone foundations partially swallowed by roots and time, this one rose into the sky. A moss-covered ziggurat with weather-worn steps stretched upward, and atop it, the shattered remains of a ceremonial arch still stood, defying gravity and centuries of rain. The path leading up had been carved with figures that were unfamiliar, and while the team's lead archaeologist attempted to make notes of the style, nothing matched known civilizations. They had expected to find remnants of the Omagua or perhaps a long-lost outpost of the Inca, but this architecture whispered of something else entirely. The proportions were strange, the doorways too small for an average man, and the ceiling heights too vast for anything that wasn't meant to impress the sky. Each stone had been polished smooth, not by time, but intentionally so, as if the builders had wanted reflections to dance on the surfaces. Around the base of the ziggurat were shattered statues of human figures, except their faces were deliberately erased. Not weathered by erosion or time, but chiseled out with purpose. Only the outlines of their poses remained, and in the place where their faces once were, deep scars of violence hinted at some forgotten conflict or ritual. What belief, they wondered silently, could drive a people to destroy the likeness of their own ancestors? One of the team, a linguist from Manaus named Luis, had been sketching the symbols they found along the temple base, trying to find a pattern. He had noticed repeating motifs: a sun pierced by a spear, a fish with too many eyes, a woman holding a spiral that twisted into a serpent's tongue. These symbols appeared not just carved into stone but painted in faded ochre on interior walls. That evening, he sat with his sketchpad by the firelight, comparing notes with the others. And as they spoke softly, exchanging theories about lost civilizations and trade routes along the Amazon's tributaries, they failed to notice the sound of drums in the far distance, faint, like a heartbeat deep in the jungle. It wasn't until their guide, a silent man from the Takuna people, stood up and vanished into the shadows that they realized the sound was not just in their imagination. He returned the next morning, his face blank and eyes hard. He said little, only muttered one word over and over when pressed for an explanation: Udal. No one recognized the word, not in Takuna, not in Portuguese, not even in Quechua or Arawak. But he would say nothing more. Later, while exploring a chamber beneath the ziggurat, they discovered what could only be described as a sacrificial room. Stone basins, long dry, stained a dark reddish-black that could not be washed away, even by centuries of rain. The walls depicted the same spiral motif over and over again, this time encircling a symbol that resembled an eye, but not a human eye. Luis grew quiet after that. He stopped drawing. He stopped eating. Eventually, he refused to leave his hammock. When they asked what was wrong, he whispered something barely audible, as if afraid the words themselves would summon something. They weren't human, he said. The builders. They weren't like us. That night, the team huddled close. The jungle, for once, didn't sleep. Something large crashed through the underbrush in the far distance. They heard low groaning noises, like wood bending, though there was no wind. And beneath it all, the soft beat of drums. Slow, steady, and patient. The jungle held its breath. The air grew thick and humid, saturated with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Each breath felt heavy, as though the atmosphere itself bore the weight of centuries, whispering secrets that had been swallowed by time. The team pressed onward, following the faint trail of worn stones embedded in the mossy earth, their steps muffled by a thick carpet of fallen leaves and delicate vines. The sunlight, filtering through the dense canopy, created shifting patterns of gold and emerald, illuminating ancient carvings half hidden by creeping roots. At the heart of this lost city, they found the Great Plaza, a vast, open space surrounded by towering stone structures adorned with intricate bas-reliefs. These carvings depicted scenes of daily life: men and women harvesting crops of maize and manioc, children playing beside rivers teeming with fish, elders engaged in solemn ceremonies beneath stars. The figures were rendered with astonishing detail, their faces etched with expressions of joy, sorrow, reverence. Among the ruins stood the Temple of the Whispering Leaves, a stepped pyramid crowned by a stone altar. The altar bore a mysterious inscription, a sequence of glyphs unlike any the scholars had encountered. The characters seemed to dance upon the weathered surface, intertwining serpents and celestial bodies, their meaning lost to time yet resonating with a deep, unspoken power. Nearby, an ancient aqueduct snaked through the city, its channels ingeniously designed to harness and distribute water from distant springs. The sophistication of this engineering was a testament to a civilization deeply attuned to the rhythms of their environment, mastering the delicate balance between growth and preservation. The people who once thrived here lived in harmony with the forest, their existence woven into the tapestry of the jungle. Their diet reflected this intimate relationship: richly flavored stews made from roasted river fish, wild yams, and fragrant herbs, sweetened beverages brewed from fermented fruits, and the staple maize, cultivated in terraces carved into the hillsides. Festivities punctuated their cycles: dances beneath moonlit skies, the beating of drums echoing through the trees, offerings laid upon altars to honor the gods who governed rain, fertility, and the unseen world. But beneath this veneer of tranquility lurked shadows. Stories whispered among the stones of a darkness that crept slowly, eroding the spirit of the city. Elders spoke of a time when the earth trembled, the rivers swelled beyond their banks, and the sky wept relentless tears. Plagues swept through the population, and the sacred rituals failed to appease the gods. Fear grew like a dense fog, suffocating hope and fracturing community bonds. One night, as the rain hammered against stone and leaf, a terrible howl rose from the depths of the forest, a sound not of any known creature, but something ancient and terrible. The people fled into the jungle, abandoning homes, altars, and memories. Vines swallowed the paths. Trees grew thick and wild, hiding the city beneath their emerald shroud. Now, centuries later, the explorers stood amid this forgotten place, listening to the jungle reclaim its dominion. The wind stirred the leaves overhead, carrying faint echoes of a world long past, a world of laughter, song, fear, and resilience. And as shadows lengthened and dusk settled, the ruins seemed to breathe once more, inviting those willing to listen into their timeless embrace. The early morning light filtered through the thick canopy, casting mottled shadows across the cracked stone pathways as the team prepared to explore a newly uncovered sector of the lost city. This area, nestled beside a winding tributary of the Amazon, revealed signs of daily life seldom preserved in ruins. Clay cooking pots half buried in earth, stone grinding slabs stained with remnants of seeds and tubers, and fragments of woven baskets that once held harvested crops. As they delved deeper, the subtle hum of the jungle, the rustle of leaves, distant bird calls, gave way to an almost uncanny stillness, as if the forest held its breath alongside them. They crossed a series of narrow bridges spanning small streams, careful not to disturb the fragile balance of roots and stones. The ruins here were smaller, more intimate, huts constructed of stone and wood, their foundations preserved beneath layers of earth and fallen leaves. The archaeologists uncovered murals inside what appeared to be communal dwellings, vibrant with depictions of seasonal cycles, the planting and harvesting of manioc, and ritual dances celebrating the river spirits. Figures wore ornate headdresses fashioned from feathers and carved bone, their faces painted in patterns of red and black. Children played at the edges of the scenes, chasing butterflies and watching the elders weave baskets. One artifact stood out: a small ceramic vessel, decorated with intricate patterns and filled with traces of fermented fruit juice, suggesting a form of early celebration or offering. Around this vessel, the team found scattered seeds of wild cacao and manioc, revealing a diet rich in cultivated and foraged foods. The social structure of this community appeared complex, with evidence of specialized roles. Artisans crafting tools and ornaments, hunters skilled in trapping river fish and forest game, and spiritual leaders conducting ceremonies at stone altars adorned with fresh flowers and animal carvings. The harmony between people and environment was evident in their sustainable agricultural terraces and sophisticated water management systems, ensuring survival in the unpredictable rhythms of the rainforest. Yet, despite these signs of prosperity, the ruins told a story tinged with fragility. Signs of sudden abandonment, unfinished meals, tools left mid-use, and the absence of burials hinted at a swift departure. The team theorized that environmental changes, disease, or conflict might have forced the inhabitants to flee, leaving their city to the slow embrace of the jungle. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the stone floors, the explorers felt the weight of countless generations pressing upon them. The city, lost and forgotten, still whispered through every leaf and crack, urging remembrance of a people who had once thrived in harmony and mystery deep within the heart of the Amazon. As the explorers ventured further into the depths of the jungle, the air grew denser, not just with moisture, but with a palpable sense of history pressing close, as if the very earth beneath their feet remembered footsteps long vanished. They found themselves standing before the ruins of what appeared to be a grand marketplace, its stone foundations sprawling across a broad clearing ringed by towering ceiba trees. Weathered stone platforms formed stalls where traders had once laid out goods from across the river valleys and forest paths. Jewels carved from river stones, vibrant textiles dyed with crushed berries, and vessels of clay painted in swirling motifs. The marketplace was not just a place of commerce, but a hub of social exchange, ritual, and storytelling. Painted murals on adjacent walls depicted vibrant scenes. Elders seated beneath great trees, sharing tales of creation and survival. Children learning the ways of the forest. Dancers celebrating the harvest beneath swirling clouds. In the corner, a stone podium bore carvings of celestial bodies, sun, moon, and stars, indicating the community's deep connection to astronomical cycles and their influence on planting and gathering. Nearby, a network of canals and small pools glistened faintly under the filtered light. These waterworks channeled the seasonal rains to irrigate fields and provide fish for the inhabitants. Ingeniously designed sluice gates controlled water flow, a testament to sophisticated engineering and a profound understanding of their environment's rhythms. The water itself was central to life here, not just for survival but woven into spiritual beliefs, as many carvings depicted serpents and amphibians associated with fertility and renewal. The foodways of the people revealed a complex relationship with their surroundings. Analysis of cooking vessels and hearths indicated they cultivated manioc, maize, and various fruits, supplementing these staples with hunted game, river fish, and foraged nuts and seeds. Communal feasts celebrated the changing seasons, marked by rhythmic drumming, feathered costumes, and offerings to the gods who controlled rain and growth. Yet, amid the vibrancy of daily life, subtle signs hinted at unrest. Some walls bore hastily inscribed warnings or prayers, while others were marred by claw marks or cracks that suggested earthquakes or attacks. Skeletons found near the edge of the site showed signs of trauma, and scattered weapon fragments suggested conflict. The cause of the city's eventual abandonment remained a mystery. Was it war, disease, environmental catastrophe, or a combination of forces? As dusk settled and shadows lengthened across the ruins, the explorers gathered around their campfire, contemplating the lives that had unfolded here so long ago. The jungle, ever patient, whispered ancient stories through rustling leaves and distant calls. Though the city slept beneath its green blanket, its heartbeat echoed faintly in the stones and streams, waiting to be understood, remembered, and honored. The jungle's quiet was deceptive, a subtle veil over centuries of stories etched into stone and whispered by leaves. As dawn's first light filtered through the thick canopy, the explorers set out toward a part of the city that had remained elusive until now. The residential quarter, where the lives of ordinary people had once unfolded in all their complex simplicity. Stone foundations arranged in tight clusters revealed homes built with care, low walls, sturdy doorways, and central courtyards filled with wild orchids and medicinal plants. The floors were smoothed river stones, worn by countless footsteps. In some homes, fragments of woven mats, still faintly scented with the resin of jungle trees, lay preserved beneath collapsed roofs. The scent of earth and wood lingered as if the walls themselves remembered. Within these humble dwellings, traces of daily routines emerged. Clay pots, chipped and blackened from fire, held remnants of stews flavored with chili peppers and wild herbs. Grinding stones bore the marks of crushing manioc and maize, staples that sustained generations. Small bone needles hinted at the art of weaving, and delicate shell beads suggested that even in everyday life, beauty and expression mattered. Children's footprints, etched in soft mud beside hearths, told silent stories of play and learning. Nearby, carved wooden toys, animals and miniature tools lay broken but unmistakably cherished. Walls bore faded paintings of birds and butterflies, symbols believed to carry messages between worlds. The community had a rhythm, measured by the sun and stars, by the cycles of planting and harvest, by the arrival of rains and the fullness of rivers. Each day began with offerings to the spirits of the forest, small tokens left beneath great trees or at the edges of cultivated plots. Songs and chants accompanied work, weaving together labor and worship. Yet, despite this harmony, signs of struggle appeared. Certain homes bore scars, fire damage, collapsed walls, hurried repairs. Skeletal remains suggested illnesses that swept through families, and food storage pits showed irregular patterns, hinting at shortages. The jungle, generous yet unforgiving, could be both cradle and grave. At the heart of the residential area stood a communal building, larger and more ornate than the others. Here, decisions were made, disputes settled, and knowledge passed from elders to youth. Walls were inscribed with stories, myths of creation, warnings of imbalance, guidance on living with the forest rather than against it. Explorers found that even after centuries, the spirit of the people remained woven into the fabric of the city. Every stone, every carving, every shadow held fragments of lives lived with courage, faith, and resilience. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the jungle exhaled, and the ruins settled once more into their quiet vigil, guarding secrets waiting patiently for voices to awaken them. The explorers awoke to a chorus of birdsong that seemed to celebrate the day as though the jungle itself rejoiced in their presence. The path ahead led them toward a section of the city marked by towering stone pillars, each etched with symbols so precise and elaborate that it was clear these columns had once supported a grand hall, a place of gathering, ceremony, or perhaps governance. As they stepped between the pillars, the atmosphere shifted. The air carried a faint scent of ancient incense and something else, something metallic and bittersweet, like rust on rain-soaked iron. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, cracked, and littered with fragments of polished obsidian blades and intricately carved bone amulets. Their linguist, Luis, pored over sketches of the glyphs adorning the pillars. This set was different, more formal, less pictorial, more abstract. Repeated motifs suggested the names of rulers, celestial events, and perhaps the record of treaties or laws. It was as if this hall had been the beating heart of the city's political life, a place where decisions shaped the fate of thousands. Nearby, a collapsed chamber revealed remains of ritual paraphernalia. Bowls filled with red pigment, feathered headdresses, and a carved stone basin stained dark, likely used for offerings or purification rites. The archaeologists surmised that priests or shamans had convened here to communicate with the spirits, using trance and ceremony to guide the community through times of hardship. As they explored further, the team uncovered a hidden stairwell spiraling downward beneath the hall, leading to subterranean chambers that had escaped the ravages of weather and time. Within these vaulted rooms, the walls were painted with elaborate murals showing star maps, serpents entwined with moons, and figures clothed in shimmering robes wielding staffs topped with glowing stones. The significance was profound. This was not merely a city, but a nexus of knowledge and spirituality, a place where cosmology and governance intertwined. The society had viewed the heavens as a living map, guiding agriculture, ritual, and social order, entwining human fate with celestial cycles. Yet, despite the grandeur, a sense of impending doom pervaded the murals. Scenes depicted violent storms tearing through villages, figures falling in conflict, and shadowy entities lurking beyond the veil of reality. The explorers could not shake the feeling that the downfall of this city had been intertwined with forces beyond mere human reckoning. Night fell, and as the campfires flickered, the jungle's whispers grew louder. Somewhere in the distance, drums beat slowly, steadily, like a heartbeat calling through the ages. The explorers, caught between wonder and unease, realized they had not merely uncovered stones. They had touched the echoes of a civilization whose story demanded to be heard, yet whose final chapters remained shrouded in mystery. The sun climbed higher, casting dappled light across the jungle floor as the explorers pressed on beyond the ceremonial hall, following a winding path flanked by towering ceiba trees whose roots tangled with ancient stone walls. This portion of the city revealed a remarkable feature: an intricate network of underground tunnels and chambers that seemed designed both for protection and sacred ritual. The entrance was nearly hidden beneath layers of moss and creeping vines, a stone archway carved with images of coiled serpents and winged creatures, their eyes inlaid with small pieces of jade that still shimmered faintly despite centuries of neglect. Descending carefully into the cool darkness, the team's lanterns illuminated walls painted with vibrant pigments, scenes of cosmic battles, the rising and setting of suns, and human figures engaged in rites beneath swirling stars. These tunnels served as more than passageways. They were a spiritual journey, a deliberate path through symbolic stages of life, death, and rebirth. At intervals, alcoves housed altars with offering bowls, their contents long decayed but still faintly fragrant with aromatic resins. The air was thick with an invisible weight, a solemn reverence that seemed to press upon the explorers' shoulders, urging them to tread lightly. In one chamber, they found evidence of a long-forgotten library. Shelves carved into stone held bundles of preserved bark and reed scrolls, though time and moisture had claimed most. Yet, fragments remained, their faded ink hinting at knowledge of astronomy, herbal medicine, and the stories of gods who walked among mortals. Outside, the jungle seemed to hold its breath, shadows lengthening as afternoon moved toward dusk. The explorers emerged to find the city bathed in golden light, the ruins glowing softly as if the stones themselves remembered the sun's warmth. Nearby, a circle of stone monoliths formed what appeared to be an ancient calendar, their alignment precise enough to mark solstices and equinoxes, a testament to the people's deep connection with the cycles of nature. Despite the grandeur and sophistication uncovered, a haunting question persisted. Why had such a thriving, complex city been abandoned? Evidence of sudden fires, broken weapons, and hastily buried graves suggested conflict. Yet the true cause remained elusive. Disease, invasion, or environmental catastrophe might have played their part, but the ruins held no clear answer, only fragments and shadows. As night fell once more, the jungle came alive with sounds, calls of nocturnal creatures, rustling leaves, and distant drums that seemed to echo through time. The explorers, caught between wonder and uncertainty, felt the weight of history settle around them, a reminder that some mysteries are meant to endure, whispering through the ages like the wind through the ancient trees. Dawn broke quietly over the dense canopy, light spilling in thin beams through the thick latticework of leaves, revealing the ruins bathed in soft gold. The explorers moved with a mix of reverence and urgency, drawn toward a sprawling complex they had only recently uncovered. A network of stone terraces rising like steps into the forested hills, each level crowned with remnants of homes, gardens, and shrines. These terraces spoke of a people who had mastered the art of living with the steep, often unforgiving landscape of the Amazon basin. The earth was sculpted to hold water, to nurture crops of maize, beans, and manioc. Between the terraces, stone-lined channels carried rainwater gently downward, nourishing the plants and filling small pools that attracted birds and small animals. The integration of agriculture and ecology was seamless, an ancient blueprint for sustainability. Amid these terraces lay the remains of communal ovens, large clay structures where bread and maize cakes were baked, their interiors still blackened with centuries of fire. Nearby, ceramic bowls and plates lay shattered, hinting at gatherings where food was shared not merely for sustenance, but as an expression of community and tradition. Intriguing symbols decorated the stone walls, a combination of spirals, jaguar motifs, and abstract forms. Some symbols aligned with the positions of certain stars, suggesting that astronomy guided not only their rituals but their very survival. Planting seasons, hunting expeditions, and festivals were timed by the movement of celestial bodies, weaving human life into the fabric of the cosmos. The people of this city were more than builders and farmers. They were artists, priests, storytellers. The team found fragments of woven textiles dyed with vibrant reds, yellows, and blues, their patterns complex and evocative, telling stories of gods, ancestors, and the natural world. Musical instruments carved from bone and wood, flutes, rattles, drums, hinted at celebrations filled with sound and movement, an auditory tapestry that filled the nights with rhythm. Yet the ruins also told of struggle. The signs of sudden abandonment persisted: unharvested crops, broken tools left behind, and a distinct lack of graves within the terraces themselves, suggesting hurried flight or disaster. The explorers debated what calamity could have severed this harmonious existence: a prolonged drought, flood, epidemic, or invasion. As the afternoon light waned, the jungle sounds shifted from the vibrant calls of day creatures to the eerie chorus of night dwellers. The explorers gathered around their fires, sharing observations and stories, feeling the weight of countless lives and countless lost days. The city, with its terraces rising like steps to the sky, stood as a monument not only to what had been but to the resilience and creativity of those who had called it home. The explorers awoke under a sky mottled with dawn's soft pinks and grays, the thick jungle canopy around them slowly stirring as the heat of the day began to build. Today's journey would take them beyond the familiar stone terraces to the outer edges of the lost city, an area less preserved but rich with signs of daily life, trade, and cultural exchange. As they moved through tangled undergrowth, they stumbled upon a vast marketplace once alive with movement, colors, and voices. The stone-paved plaza, though cracked and overgrown, retained the layout of stalls and gathering spaces, evidence of a bustling hub where goods from distant river valleys were exchanged. Woven baskets, carved wooden figurines, and pottery shards hinted at a diverse economy, tied to both forest and water. Traders here had brought prized items: obsidian blades from volcanic regions, colorful feathers from exotic birds, and precious shells gathered from riverbanks. These were not just commodities but symbols of status and spiritual power, worn in elaborate headdresses or offered at sacred ceremonies. Inscriptions on nearby stones suggested rules governing trade and social conduct, an early form of regulation ensuring harmony amid diversity. The team uncovered signs of festivals celebrated with song and dance beneath large shade trees, where the people honored the cycles of nature and the gods who controlled growth, rain, and renewal. Musical instruments, rattles made from gourds, flutes fashioned from bones, and drums carved from hollow logs were found in various states of decay, yet their cultural significance remained clear. Food played a central role in these gatherings. Communal feasts featuring roasted fish caught from the nearby rivers, richly spiced stews made from wild yams and tubers, and sweet beverages brewed from fermented fruits and honey. The sharing of food was not merely for sustenance but a ritual of connection, binding individuals into the social fabric. Despite the vibrancy of life recorded here, the traces of sudden abandonment remained. Evidence of fires, broken pottery, and hastily buried offerings suggested a city caught off guard by catastrophe or conflict. The explorers speculated on the causes, whether natural disaster, epidemic, or invading forces, but the exact story remained lost beneath layers of soil and silence. As twilight settled, the jungle once again awakened with nocturnal life. The distant call of howler monkeys, the flutter of bats, and the steady beating of unseen drums that seemed to echo from the depths of time. The explorers, enveloped in both wonder and mystery, realized they had only just begun to unravel the intricate tapestry of a civilization that once thrived in harmony with the forest's rhythms. The morning sun filtered through thick curtains of moss and lianas, casting a gentle, filtered light upon the weathered stones as the explorers ventured toward an area of the city that had, until now, remained largely hidden beneath the relentless grasp of the jungle. Here, the ruins spoke not of grand temples or marketplaces, but of intimate spaces where art, ritual, and daily magic intertwined. They found what appeared to be a complex of small chambers arranged around a central courtyard, the walls covered with faded murals and delicate carvings. The images depicted scenes of transformation, humans merging with animals, trees growing from open hands, and celestial bodies descending to touch the earth. These motifs suggested a spiritual worldview deeply connected to nature's cycles, where boundaries between the human, animal, and divine realms blurred. Artifacts scattered across the floors included finely crafted jewelry made from river pearls and colored stones, ritual masks fashioned from bark and feathers, and bundles of dried herbs and resins believed to have been used for healing and divination. The lingering scent of sweet incense seemed almost tangible, as if the spirits of those long gone still moved among the ruins. In the courtyard stood a stone basin filled with water that shimmered unnaturally in the dappled light. Local guides whispered legends of the basin's powers, said to reveal visions or cleanse the soul, and although the explorers approached with scientific caution, the basin's surface reflected not only their faces but faint, shifting images of the past, like memories trapped in liquid time. Beyond the chambers lay a series of carved stone steps descending into a cool, shadowed grotto where underground springs flowed. The people of this city had harnessed these waters for both practical use and sacred ceremonies, believing them to be gifts from the gods. Offerings of carved figurines and woven charms were found here, carefully arranged in patterns that echoed the stars. The social life reflected in this part of the city was rich with symbolism and ceremony. The blending of artistry and spirituality suggested a culture that celebrated transformation and rebirth, not only in nature but within the human soul. This was a place where healers, artists, and priests gathered to commune with the unseen, ensuring balance between the world above and the mysteries below. Yet, even here, signs of disruption were evident. Some murals bore scars, scratches, or faded patches, as if altered by those who survived the city's decline, attempting to erase or rewrite parts of their history. Among the ruins lay broken ritual objects, suggesting that the sacred rhythms had been violently interrupted. As the explorers prepared to leave the grotto, a sudden breeze stirred the hanging moss, and faint sounds, like whispered voices or distant chants, seemed to rise from the stones themselves. In that moment, the ancient city felt less like a forgotten relic and more like a living presence, waiting patiently to reveal its secrets to those willing to listen. As the explorers left the shadowed grotto behind, the thick canopy above them whispered softly with the rising wind, carrying scents of wet earth and blooming orchids. They found themselves on a narrow ridge overlooking a vast expanse of jungle, where the ancient city's sprawl gave way to dense forest as far as the eye could see. From this vantage point, the scale of the civilization slowly emerging from beneath centuries of decay became apparent, its stone temples and plazas punctuating the vibrant green like silent sentinels guarding forgotten memories. Below, tangled roots snaked through collapsed walls, while giant ceiba trees stretched their great limbs skyward, as if attempting to reclaim what was once theirs. The ruins, though weathered and fractured, retained a grandeur that spoke of a people who had dared to shape the wild land around them with skill, reverence, and vision. The team descended carefully along ancient stairways, their steps stirring centuries-old dust and leaf litter. They entered a vast ceremonial plaza, its open space ringed by stone benches and smaller altars adorned with carvings of jaguars, serpents, and birds of prey. At the plaza's center stood a massive stone disc, worn smooth but etched with complex patterns. Perhaps a calendar, a map, or a sacred symbol linking earth and sky. The plaza had been the heart of communal life, a place where the city's inhabitants gathered for festivals, rites of passage, and solemn vows to the gods. Archaeologists uncovered traces of elaborate feasts held here, fragments of roasted river fish, crushed fruits, and pottery vessels containing fermented beverages made from wild honey and tropical fruits. Music and dance would have filled the air, the rhythms of drums and flutes echoing beneath the vast canopy. Surrounding the plaza, workshops and artisan quarters revealed evidence of skilled craftsmanship. Clay figurines, finely carved bone tools, and textiles dyed with vibrant colors were found in various stages of completion. The artisans had woven their culture into every object, blending function and beauty with symbolic meaning. Yet the city bore scars of hardship, burn marks on stones, hastily abandoned artifacts, and signs of structural damage told a story of sudden upheaval. Oral traditions from indigenous groups in the region spoke of dark times, floods, disease, and conflict that forced their ancestors to flee these places, leaving behind their homes and dreams. As twilight deepened, the explorers gathered once more under the stars, feeling the pulse of the jungle and the weight of stories woven into every stone and leaf. The city's silence was not emptiness but a profound invitation, a call to remember, to honor, and to continue unraveling the mysteries of those who had walked these paths before. As the final rays of the sun slipped beneath the horizon, casting a warm, amber glow over the jungle canopy, the explorers stood together on the highest terrace of the forgotten city. Below them, the ruins stretched like a tapestry woven by time. Stone foundations entwined with vines, crumbled temples half swallowed by the earth, and shadowed courtyards where history whispered softly. The forest, ancient and eternal, cradled these remnants with both tenderness and inevitability, reminding all who beheld it that nature reclaims all with patience beyond human measure. In the quiet of the evening, the explorers reflected on the journey that had brought them here, through tangled undergrowth and murky rivers, over moss-covered stones and across sun-dappled clearings. Each step had revealed fragments of lives once lived in harmony with the jungle, lives filled with laughter, labor, love, and loss. They had walked the paths of ancestors who cultivated the earth with care, who sang songs beneath starlit skies, who honored gods both fierce and gentle. The city had been a marvel of ingenuity and spirit, a civilization that understood the delicate balance between growth and decay, between human ambition and the wild's inexorable power. The intricate canals and terraces bore witness to advanced knowledge of ecology. The art and architecture spoke of rich cultural and spiritual lives. The burial sites and artifacts told stories of hope, resilience, and tragedy. Yet, the true mystery remained. Why had this vibrant city, pulsating with life and wisdom, faded into silence? The clues, scarred walls, abandoned tools, hurried departures, hinted at a confluence of forces beyond simple explanation. Perhaps shifting climate, disease, conflict, or spiritual crisis had intertwined to bring an end to this chapter of human history. Or maybe, the jungle itself had drawn its breath and reclaimed its realm, folding the city into its ever-changing embrace. As night deepened, the stars emerged in brilliant clusters, their ancient light casting a silver glow upon the ruins. The explorers lit small fires, their flames flickering gently as stories and songs were shared, some modern, others inspired by the echoes they'd uncovered. The forest responded with nocturnal chorus, the call of owls, the rustle of leaves, the distant howl of a howler monkey, timeless companions in the endless dance of life and death. In that moment, the forgotten city was no longer just a relic. It was alive in memory and spirit, a bridge across time connecting past and present. It whispered to those who listened, reminding them that even as civilizations rise and fall, the stories endure, etched not only in stone but in the heart of the earth and the souls of its children. The explorers left at dawn, carrying with them a profound sense of humility and wonder. They knew the jungle would continue its slow work, covering and revealing, erasing and remembering. But they also knew that through their work, the forgotten city had found new life, a testament to the enduring human spirit and the mysteries that lie beneath the green vastness of the Amazon. And so, the story ends, not with finality, but with the quiet promise of discovery yet to come, in the whispers of the leaves and the shadows of the stones.